I was recently having a discussion with a God believer, and the conversation turned to the problem of evil. Why do bad things happen if God is all good? I questioned. My conversation partner turned my attention to a biblical verse, which he stated indicated that God gave human beings free will. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. In providing human beings free will, so his argument continued, God provided us opportunity to do good or commit evil. So ultimately, evil is in the world because human beings exercise their God-given free will, but use it improperly and sometimes make evil choices. I pondered this explanation for the briefest of moments before I asked, why? Why did God provide human beings free will if it brought evil into the world? The answer was one I've heard many times before. Because God does not want human beings to be robots, the believer said. God wants human beings to choose good willingly, and of their own free choosing, choose to follow God's good example. I pondered this explanation for another brief moment before I asked, how? How could God give free will? This question was much more difficult for my believing friend to answer, but after a moment he said, God can do anything. But, I countered, God cannot do just anything. God cannot do evil, right? To this my friend paused to consider my observation. In that moment I pressed the matter further. Free will is merely the exercise of choice. I exercise free will when I make a choice in the morning to have waffles or pancakes. There is no evil in my decision, merely the exercise of free will. Why did God create circumstances in which the exercise of free will resulted in evil consequences? Why not, out of all possible worlds available to the omnipotent God, did he not create a world in which there is free will, but no evil? A world in which free will can be exercised, but between choices involving only positive outcomes. One needn't choose between waffles in the morning or a loaded 45 in order to exercise one's free will. Creating such a world hardly seems impossible for such a creature as the believer's God. My believing friend now puzzled the problem further and still had not formulated answers to my avalanche of questions, so I decided to pose a simpler problem. I said, God cannot do evil, correct? To which my friend quickly and happily replied, correct. No doubt eager to have an answer to one of my many questions, I clarified, and God cannot do evil because it is not in his nature to do evil, right? Right, came the reply. So how can God provide human beings with a quality he lacks? If God were to go into the kitchen and have a nature by which he could not choose waffles for breakfast but could only choose pancakes, then I, as a human being, have more free will than the thing which created me. How is that possible? Moreover, as a free agent, which God is not, constrained as he is by his nature, human beings are able to choose between good and evil, and by choosing good, can thereby be called good, on the very basis of that judgment. God, however, cannot be considered good for having made proper decisions, because by his nature, he cannot choose otherwise. When a human being chooses to help a child in need, instead of allowing the child to die in poverty, he can be ruled good, for the very reason the human being could have done otherwise. However, when God aids a child in need, he does so not because it is the good thing to do, and he chooses to do it, but only because he cannot do otherwise. And therefore, for God to exist, children dying in poverty and hunger to disease must be a good thing, because God, who does only good by his very nature, is choosing to allow these things to happen, and by his nature he cannot choose to do evil. Children and others are in need because it is a good thing. Otherwise God, out of his good nature, would have made corrections to their circumstances. By definition, going against God's will is an act of evil. Therefore, one should not seek to change the world as God allows it to exist, and help those in need. This is the only conclusion the believer can come to if they believe in such a God. While my believing friend pondered, uncomfortably it seemed to me, the questions and conclusions I had presented to him, I gave him one final thought to consider. If God cannot choose to do evil by his very nature, and is the model of behavior all humans should aspire to mimic, and indeed is the model of behavior all human beings are judged against, why was it not possible for him to create a creature in his own image, who was likewise incapable of choosing evil by its very own nature. Does God consider himself a robot because he is such a being as this?